back to Belinda's DIYs. If this is your first time here, I want to welcome you, and then I hope that you will stick around long enough so that you can subscribe to my channel. In this channel, you're going to see a lot of easy and inexpensive DIYs for your home and also seasonal crafts. In today's video, I'm going to be creating some more Christmas home decor. I can't wait to show you some of the items that I used to put these crafts together. And they're going to be very inexpensive because all the materials came from Dollar Tree. So if you're like me that loves inexpensive crafts and DIYs, then I think you'll appreciate these. So if you want to see how I put them together, then please keep watching. So before we get started, I just want to take just a little bit of your time and just show you my t-shirt. This is one of my latest designs in my t-shirts that I've been creating. If you're interested in this one in particular, I'm going to go ahead and link it down below in the description box, and you can go check out the rest of the t-shirts that I've been designing. I just want to say that I really appreciate all your comments. I read each and every one of them, and I love whenever you give me tips on maybe things that I didn't think of when I was crafting, and you give me an idea or a tip. I love that because it does help me out. I appreciate that tremendously. Okay, so enough said. Let's go ahead and get started. For this DIY, I'm going to be using this red pool noodle, and keep in mind all these materials are from Dollar Tree. The first thing that I'm going to do is remove the sticker, and then I'm going to start cutting 7 pieces of this pool noodle, and I'll be using a knife for that. And I'm just going to randomly cut different sizes, so it doesn't matter the size, it just matters that you have 7 pieces. Next, I'm going to be using these stencils because I'm going to spell out the word believe. And I'll also be using this Waverly chalk paint in the color white. And I'll also be using this beauty sponge. Okay, so I'm going to start with the first letter, and on the first tube that I cut, I'm going to paint on the letter B, and then I'll move on to the next tube and then put the letter E, and then so forth until I spell out the word believe. Okay, so now that I've stenciled in all my letters, what I'm going to do next is fill in the little gaps that those stencils have. As you can see right there, I'm filling in that little space. So I'm going to do that to the rest of the stencil letters, and then I'll be right back. The next thing that I'm going to do is hot glue all the tubes together, and I'm starting now with the B and the E, and I'm just going to put some hot glue along the side of the tube and then just join them together. Next, I'm going to join the letter L next to the E, and I'll just continue hot gluing the remainder of the letters. Dollar Tree right now has these little miniature trees, so I'm going to be using 4 of these packs, and they come in a pack of 2. Next, what I'm going to do is hot glue these little miniature trees to the top of my tube. I'm just going to add a dab of hot glue underneath the Christmas tree and then just place it on top, and I'll be putting all those trees along the top of the tubes. From those 4 packs, I had 1 little Christmas tree left over, but I have to say this was the easiest DIY that I think that I've ever done. For this next DIY, I'll be using 2 of these dish drying mats, and these are from the Christmas collection from Dollar Tree. I absolutely love this buffalo check pattern. So I'm going to start by just removing all the tags and also the little plastic holders, and I'm going to carefully remove them because with this mat, it seems like if you pull too hard, it'll tear, or you can see like a little indentation on the pattern. I'm also going to be using the snowflake ornament. What I'm going to do to this snowflake is remove the bling wrap that it has on the front. I'm just going to lift it off as you see me do right there. Okay, so now that I've removed the bling wrap, as you can see now it's nice and flat, and what I'm going to use the snowflake is to stamp it on my mat. Okay, so I've added some white Waverly chalk paint to a pan, and now I'm dipping my snowflake in the pan, as you can see, And I'm just making sure that the snowflake is completely covered with the white paint. Okay, so now I'm ready to stamp the snowflake onto my mat. And I'm just gonna be doing this to this one mat. And now you have a pretty snowflake print on this mat. And it looks so pretty, I think. So I'm gonna let this paint dry for just a few hours and then I'll come back to finish it off. I'm gonna be using this cotton mop head to make some tassels for my pillow. Okay, so just let me tell you really quick what I did with the mop head. This is the holder that held all the mop strings. And what I did, I used my wire cutters to cut into the plastic and also into the middle holder that was actually holding the strings. And I cut the plastic and that way it would release the strings. Okay, so this is how I'm gonna make my tassel. I'm gonna get 6 strings from the mop and I'm also gonna use 2 pieces of yarn. So I'm gonna lay 1 piece of yarn down and then place the bundle of strings down the center. And then I'm gonna grab both ends of the yarn and then make a tight knot in the center. And then I'm gonna place the last piece of yarn and then I'm gonna place the bundle of strings right in the center and then I'm gonna tie another knot nice and tight. And now I'm just gonna cut the strings and shorten them just a little bit. And then lastly, I'm just gonna cut the strings and shorten them. And this is how all 4 tassels turned out. Okay, so now I'm ready to create my pillow. So I went ahead and I placed both of the bottom mats facing each other as I'm showing you right there. So I'm gonna start hot gluing up at the corner, but what I did first is add one of the tassels there on the corner. I placed some hot glue and then I went ahead and I placed the other mat on top and that way it's sandwiched between the 2 mats. And I'm just gonna keep going down, adding hot glue in sections at a time until I get to the corners and then I'll add a tassel. I am gonna leave an opening down at the bottom so that I can put some cotton through there. I left an opening about 3.5 inches. I'll be using this cotton from an old pillow and now I'm gonna start stuffing my pillow. And now I'm gonna be closing up the opening by just adding some hot glue. And this is how it turned out. For this DIY, I'm going to be using another dish drying mat with the same buffalo check pattern. So what I'm going to do is cut 3 circles. I've already cut one of them right there. So I'm going to start by turning it over to the back side and then I'm going to use this candle lid that is about the size of a coaster, and I'll be using also this gold permanent marker. I'll be using it to trace around the lid. The reason I'm using this gold color is because I just needed something that would stand out against the black. Now this is a sample. This is one that I created earlier. And now I'm just gonna cut out my 3 circles. Okay, so now that I have my 3 circles, what I'm gonna do is cover the edges with the mop strings that I used earlier for the pillow tassels. So I'm just gonna add some hot glue there on the edge and then I'll add the string. And I'll just keep going around until I cover the edge completely, and I'll be doing that to the rest of the circles. I'll be using one of these snowflake ornaments to stamp my coasters just like I did my pillow. I'm going to be using my sanding block to remove some of the glitter on my snowflake. I'll also be using this white Waverly chalk paint. Okay, so I'm basically going to do the same thing as I did with the larger snowflake. I'm going to dip the snowflake into the paint and I'm going to make sure it's all covered, and then I'm going to stamp it onto my coaster. Now I did have to do it several times because the snowflake wasn't coming out as outlined as I wanted it to. So this just depends up to you if you decide to do this project, if you want your snowflake to be just lightly printed on there or heavily. It just really depends on you. For this project, I'm going to use 3 of these puzzles, and the reason I'm using these is because they are made of wood. The back side is nice and sturdy, so I'm going to be using these 3. I'm also going to be using these printouts that I made on PicMonkey. I'll be using this for sale sign, and also these Christmas trees, and also the letters that are going to spell out Christmas. Now, if you decide to do this project, you can also use these jumbo stencil letters, and these are 6 inches. Now, these I found them at Dollar General. Since this is a puzzle, the pieces do fall out, so what I'm going to do first is hot glue the pieces down. Now, the reason that I chose to use this puzzle board is because of that reason, because they are made of some type of wood board. And if you can see the width, it's a good size. So I know that my sign will be nice and sturdy. I'll be gluing down the pieces to these other 2 boards. So once I glue them all down, I'm going to have 1 board going across that I can work on. But the first thing that I'm going to do is flip them over to the front side, which is really going to be the back side. This is where I'm going to glue my boards together. Okay, so I'm going to start by joining 2 boards together, and I'm going to add some hot glue, and then I'm going to place a craft stick over it, and it's one of those jumbo ones from Walmart. And now for this other side, I'm going to do the same thing, but for this side I am going to use the Dollar Tree craft sticks because I did have enough of those and I didn't have enough of the jumbo ones. I'm also going to be using this stake from this Dollar Tree decor. Now this is an old sign that I had for a while, but I put away everything in case I may need it. So now that I have this long stake, I'm going to use it to reinforce my long board. So now I'm just going to add some hot glue on my stake and then place it on my board. So now I just want to take you up close so that you can see how I filled in with glue all along the side of the board on both sides. I'm also going to use some Gorilla wood glue, and I'll use this on the front side of the boards where they join together. Now I'm going to let the glue dry for a few hours before I continue working on the board. I'm also going to be using some of this spackling because I want to close up some of the gaps that the boards have. Okay, so I'm done and I just want to take you up close so that you can see how it looks now. Now I'm going to let this dry overnight and then I'll come back and work on it the next day. Okay, so it's now the next day and what I'm going to do is sand it off with my sanding block and just make sure that my board is nice and smooth. I'll be using this chalk paint to paint my board, and this is from the Kilt Chalk Style paint. I went ahead and I gave this 2 coats of paint. And lastly, I'm going to be using some Mod Podge so that I can glue down my words to my sign. And then lastly, I painted some black lines on each side of the for sale words. Now for this last project, I'm going to be using a pizza pan. And from this Walmart sticker, I'm going to be using the hat and also the nose. And this is from the holiday time. So I'm going to start off by painting my pizza pan with this white Waverly chalk paint. I'm only going to give this one coat of paint. Okay, so I'm not so crazy about the glitter carrot nose, so what I'm gonna do is paint it with some acrylic paint in the color Spice Carrot. The next thing that I'm gonna do is cut the snowman's hat off. The next thing that I'm gonna do is remove the sticker hat, and I'm gonna place it over a foam board. Okay, so now that my hat is on my foam board, I'm gonna go ahead and use this knife to cut around the hat. And this is how it turned out. I've gone ahead and I hot glued the hat to the top of the pizza pan. Since this is a countdown for Christmas, I'm gonna start writing out my numbers. So I'm gonna write out my numbers going clockwise. So I started with the 1 up at the right corner, and then I put the 24 straight across the 1. And then I also put the 12 down at the center, and that way I could more or less keep my numbers within those numbers and I wouldn't be too off as I would start writing them down, since I'm gonna do this freehand. Next, I'm going to go over my numbers using the Sharpie, and this one is with the chisel tip. And then I'll be using some of these googly eyes from Dollar Tree. So I'm going to go ahead and pick out the largest ones, and then I'm going to hot glue them onto the snowman's face. I'll also be using one of these little magnets, and these are also from Dollar Tree. They come in a pack of 4 or 6. So what I'm gonna do is hot glue it onto the carrot. And that way you can move it around easily to point to the numbers. And lastly, using the marker, I'm gonna go ahead and now make the smile for the snowman. I did also add a piece of ribbon to the back of the hat, that way if I choose to hang it, I can. And this is how he turned out. Well, that's it for this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please give me a big thumbs up, because that really helps my channel and I would truly appreciate it. You have yourself a blessed day, and remember, love, laugh, and create. Until my next video, bye-bye, and God bless.